you know what? Not everybody gets a wife. Not every man deserves a wife. Not every man deserves a wife. And if your husband was great enough to attract you and earn a wife, he can take care of her. That's okay. He's a grown boy. He's a grown man. He will be fine. You don't need to baby him. You don't need to make his life easier beyond a comfortable. Everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin and I run the blog called Mrs. Midwest. Now, I know it has been a while. As you know, if you've been following me on Instagram, I've been really wrapped up in this new move to this new house. As you can see, new setup, very cute. We are in my walk-in closet. Motherhood has been a huge focus, and as well as just getting back into shape. You know, I've been exercising a lot. A lot of the time I used to use for YouTube has gone towards other things. So all of that to say, it kind of takes a lot for me to have thoughts on things related to my YouTube channel, related to homemaking. And I do just want to say thank you to all of you who still follow along, who still watch me on Instagram or YouTube, and who have just been kind of letting me live my best life for a while. It's meant a lot to me to be able to live out the lifestyle that I've been talking about for years, of just primarily being a homemaker and a stay-at-home mom. However, I have recently seen some trends on Instagram Reels and kind of some regurgitated TikToks and just content in general that has me a little bit frustrated. So I felt inspired to make today's video. I don't quite know what we're going to title it, but basically I want to say we've lost the plot. We have lost the plot. Online homemaking content, we've lost the plot. There is so much going on there. There's so much bad advice I'm seeing. There is so much like rage bait. There is so much trolling the trolls kind of content. And honestly, I left to go be a mom and to go kind of live in my real life. And I left that homemaking space and I stopped making commentary videos. But I don't like the state of where the content is going in my absence. And I'm a firm believer that instead of just sitting back and arguing in the comments on Instagram or stewing about this, I have a YouTube channel. I have a following of impressionable young women, people who are interested in homemaking, either just from a voyeuristic point of view, or maybe you want to do it someday, or maybe you already are a homemaker. And I thought, why not give my 2 cents on the homemaking lifestyle while offering some helpful, practical advice for people who are interested in it. So I'm back and I want to talk about it because there is young foolishness happening online. So what am I really talking about? I am honestly just talking about homemakers online who are portraying themselves and homemaking in like kind of the worst possible light imaginable. Honestly, trolls and detractors don't even make us look this bad. Like, they are making themselves look this bad. Instagram, Reels, TikTok, Twitter, left, right, and center, I am seeing some brain dead takes. And I'm not even seeking out this content. It's like being fed to me while I'm just like mindlessly scrolling for some humor at the end of the day. And I'm getting fed these rage bait homemaking stay-at-home wife reels. And it gets me mad. And I think that's the purpose of a lot of this content. But today I'm going to dive into why that's not helpful, why that's bad for the cause of homemaking. And I kind of want to shed some light onto the fact that homemaking doesn't have to be this crazy fringe lifestyle that's like shock content. I'm a very normal person. I have tons of friends, real life friends and online friends who are homemakers, stay-at-home moms, and we're very normal. We're not fringe, we're not extreme, and this is an accessible lifestyle. I fear we've lost the plot so desperately, it has made me come out of commentary hibernation with a vengeance and a bit of an attitude. I'm just seeing absolute foolishness online. A lot of unserious content, but also a lot of content that should just be left in the drafts. So what specifically am I talking about? Honestly, if you don't know, bless you. I'm happy for you because this stuff is really frustrating as a person who considers herself a homemaker and a stay-at-home mom. It's frustrating to see that lifestyle depicted in such an extreme and polarizing and shocking or even offensive way. So in the kind of the introduction of this video, I'm going to elaborate. Firstly, I'm not going to call out any specific content creators, and I don't want to send like hate or criticism their way. My beef isn't with specific people, but rather the distorted caricature and honestly farcical depiction of what it is to be a homemaker all across social media. And what am I describing here? Well, it's lots of content that's like thinly veiled rage bait or even like thinly veiled fetish content. The post that actually inspired this video was a video bragging about not having a backup plan if your husband were to leave you. And I know that that's just shock content to a lot of people. I've seen a lot of posts about depending completely on a husband, almost blindly, posts that loudly boss others around that everyone needs to stay home, everyone needs to be a mother, everyone needs to have kids, everyone needs to have unlimited amount of kids. I've even seen posts that glorify and create a rather unrealistic composite sketch of what it is to be a homemaker, like totally glossing over everything while secretly hiring nannies in the background or having sisters, mothers, relatives come over to help with a bulk of the childcare. Not to mention the people who make their money off of MLMs or YouTube channels, sponsored posts, sponsorships on Instagram, while also encouraging women to give up their jobs and to totally just be a homemaker while those people are making money off of the people who they're encouraging to do that, either by selling courses. So all of this stuff I'm seeing, like even with child rearing choices, pushing for certain discipline methods that I highly disagree with, all of this has been thrown into the zeitgeist online of what it is to be a homemaker. And honestly, this just further alienates people from the concept of being a homemaker. And you guys know I did not start my channel in 2019 for the concept of homemaking to go down in flames by our own people. Like, when I say the trolls don't even need to troll because we're ruining the concept ourselves, I am not kidding. And the reason I think a lot of this content gets clicks, gets views, is because of the rage bait algorithm. I know everybody talks about it, but it is true. Rage is the number one emotion that causes people to spend time on a reel or a TikTok, to leave a comment, and to just generally engage. So what I've seen is a lot of people post online for a few years and they're not getting a lot of traction, but they kind of hit upon a bit of rage and suddenly they're getting engagement and they just keep doing it over and over. And the problem with that is, okay, fine, it's all fun and games to troll the trolls or to be unserious or to whatever. But when that's the main content about homemaking, about being a stay-at-home wife or a stay-at-home mom, how are we offering practical advice to young women or just women in general who are interested in this lifestyle? Because a lot of people are looking at the lifestyle and it looks unappealing and kind of scary and foolish, because you have people online saying, I don't need a backup plan, or my husband would never leave me, so you don't need to worry about your husband leaving you. And it's honestly, it makes me really frustrated because with my content, it's always been to kind of illuminate my lifestyle, illuminate kind of an alternative way to live without pushing people into that lifestyle. These depictions do not advance the interests of homemakers, but rather they expose the community to criticism, rightfully so. I believe that this lifestyle is still valid and reasonable and can be approached from a wise and balanced perspective. Today, I want to outline some of the questions and criticisms I'm seeing pop up in the comment sections of a lot of these rage bait reels and TikToks, because I think a lot of people, when they're considering homemaking, have valid concerns and questions, and they often just get brushed off. And as kind of a bit of an OG in this space, not an OG homemaker, but an OG homemaker content creator, I kind of view it as my job and responsibility to be honest about this lifestyle, but also to be encouraging and give you practical tips and advice and kind of illuminate how we make it work for our family. So what I'm seeing too is a lot of these criticisms are all but incited by the creators, but instead of being met with like a practical and pragmatic response, there's so much just pray, have faith, or my husband would never leave me, or don't worry about that because I don't ever worry about that because my man's amazing, he's a godly man. Like, okay, good for you, but what about the women who maybe they're not married to someone like that? What about the women who are nervous to stay home? What about the women who had a mother who stayed home and it didn't end well for her, or an auntie or somebody that she knows, and so she's scared? It is legitimately okay to be scared about entering an alternative, like less common lifestyle. There's a ton of smoke and mirrors about how people make it work as a single income family. And today I'm going to strip back the smoke and mirrors, and I'm going to give you practical advice, kind of using myself as an example, but also just things I've come to learn over the 7 years I've been doing this. So my thesis for this video is being a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom is reasonable in this modern age if you do it wisely and cautiously. So cautiously, why do I use that word? Cautiously. I think we should approach it cautiously. And now, is that to say it's a dangerous lifestyle? No, but as with everything, we need to really look at the full picture and not pretend that certain threats or difficulties or obstacles don't exist, because outsiders can see those obstacles clearly. And if we act like they don't exist, it just weakens our stance. It makes us look foolish. It makes us look really silly even, or stupid. And today I want to tell you how I approach those criticisms or fears or doubts or whatever, so that when I do come up against criticism, I don't doubt, I don't have anxiety, I have an answer. And I want you guys to have an answer. So I hope you're following with me here. But basically, we're getting content online where it's like jokingly, maybe a bit of unserious trolling, where it's like a girl in her kitchen and she's making bread, sourdough, and it's like, who wants to join me and not having a plan B? Or, oh, I just love not thinking. And then the comments are like, what are you going to do if your husband leaves you? What are you going to do financially? How are you going to handle the finances of all of this? And people are either worried, or they're angry, or they're just like disgusted. And the creators just kind of like, la la la, and like float off into the distance. And what I'm saying is that bringing up those questions is not bad. Like, yes, there is a lot of fear mongering about homemaking, but there's also reasonable concerns. And being ignorant or hostile towards these questions does nothing to advance homemaking as a concept. It just further isolates, divides, and alienates people from homemaking, so that we end up looking really dumb. So what concerns are valid and what are not? How do we address these questions in an intellectually honest way? And is it our job to assuage the doubts of the masses? Yes and no. I think if we want to have a genuine impact on the world as homemaking content creators, or just homemakers in general, it's essential to listen to these discussion points and arguments from others. And quite honestly, since I started my channel, even the people who aren't content creators in this space, I've gotten emails all the time of, I want to be a stay-at-home wife, but my in-laws are stressing me out with questions about how it's going to work. Or I want to bring up the idea of being a homemaker with my husband, but he has all these concerns and questions. My goal is to equip you ladies to have the answers for people, and to have more than just, we're going to figure it out, because there's practical ways that we can approach this. First of all, I'd like to address the fact that this lifestyle is rare. It is somewhat shocking to your average person. To act like it shouldn't be surprising or even alarming to people is a bit intellectually dishonest. The culture has changed, and it is now countercultural to live this way, especially before you have children. I know, I lived it before kids. So gathering the concerns from the comment sections and just things that I think are reasonable questions that maybe you internally have, I've narrowed them down to 3 general areas. So the first one is economic stability as a family and the cost of living of life. The second concern is financial abuse. And the third is the threat of being left with nothing if your man leaves you. Those are the 3 major issues I see pop up time and time again in the comment sections. And unfortunately, the advice I've been seeing on Reels and TikTok in the years since I've vacated this space have been somewhat helpful to reckless to blithe diminishment of these concerns. You get things like, don't pick a bad guy, trust God to feed your family, and stop buying personal items like makeup and you can afford this. Or horror upon horrors, join an MLM, make a side hustle. So not only do these statements not offer any real practical advice, they can also be interpreted as quite victim blaming. So sure, you can avoid a red flag man, but like, what if he has a mental breakdown after you get married? What if he has to go on disability? What if circumstances change? What if he does backslide and leave the Lord and start cheating on you? These things can happen. I've seen it. Being a perfect wife will not protect you from your man doing what he's going to do. That's part of living in a world with free will, where people have the free will to sin. They have the free will to be awful. And I'm not saying we should live in fear, but I am saying it's wrong to just say, oh, well, we don't need protections as stay-at-home wives because my husband would never do that to me. Because to the godly, wonderful women who it's happened to, despite their worship of the Lord or whatever, that's so hurtful, and it's not helpful. Not to mention the fact that the economy is changing. We have like record-breaking inflation. We have wages that don't necessarily match the rise in inflation, and this is stressing families out, and I think that's reasonable. And so let's start there. The number one concern column about financial stability. So how do we make it work a bit? How can we answer this criticism? So many factors go into this for your family. So first of all, your age. How old are you? How long have you been building wealth? Your income, your husband's income, the age you got married, how many kids you have, where you live, the lifestyle you live, debt, scalability in his job, if you have medical costs and needs come up, a child with disability, unexpected emergencies, so much more. And we're dealing with one income here. So to use myself as an example, things have only gotten easier as we've aged. As you can tell, we moved to a larger, nicer house. I will be 30 next April. So we are getting towards middle age and things are very comfortable for us now. But when we started out, it was tight. So what I'd like to say here is that two things matter with the economic stability of it all. First of all, who you marry and how much money he makes. And second of all, your cost of living. I could not be a stay-at-home wife and mom in London, England, or Hong Kong, or Toronto, or LA, or New York City, because it would be too expensive on the income my husband currently brings in. I live in a very low cost of living area, so the income my husband makes is actually really comfortable for both of us. As I said, we just moved into a great house. Yes, we do without, I don't live in a big bustling city. We have less entertainment, blah, 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 less access to stuff, but that's how we make it work. I have so many friends in this area too, who are also stay-at-home moms, upwards of 15 women who go to my church, all around my age. All of us are stay-at-home moms, and it's because the cost of living here is really accessible. So when you guys are coming to me online and you're like, oh, I could never make this work or whatever, check your perspective. If you live in LA or Miami or some big city, maybe my lifestyle does seem kind of crazy to you because cost of living fluctuates and matters depending on where you live. Second of all, some of us will marry high-performing salesmen or dentists or doctors, and your ability and accessibility for the homemaking lifestyle will be very different than those of us who marry mechanics, construction workers, like people on the lower income level. Now, I know those are all scalable. Don't come for me in the comments. I'm having a harder time coming up with examples of lower income, but there's a range. Say you make $50,000 as a family, your life and your accessibility to being a stay-at-home wife is going to be very different compared to the woman whose husband makes $100,000 or $150,000 a year. And keep this in mind when you're watching online content. Some of these husbands are out here making a lot more money than what your husband makes. And so it's not just like, oh, I'm married, I can automatically stay home. You have to factor in your cost of living and you have to factor in how much money your husband makes. And maybe this is also where you kind of with the homemaking get accused of gold digging because you're living off your husband. But just from a functionality point of view, I'm not ashamed to say that yes, he makes the money in the family. I live off of his income. We shouldn't be ashamed of that. That is what it is. That's part and parcel of what it is to be a homemaker, okay? So when you're considering this, you need to consider how much money your husband makes. I do warn you though and urge you to consider there's always scalability with men's income and with how these men do their jobs throughout their life. A lot of men are going to be making a lot more money at 35 than they are at 25. So maybe homemaking isn't quite accessible to you now, but maybe it could be in 5 to 7 years. You never know. So don't count yourself out. But how much money your husband makes is the number one thing that matters, as well as cost of living. Because when you combine these dynamics, if your husband has a high-paying job and you live in a high cost of living area, things could still feel kind of tight for your family. But if your husband has a high salary and you live in a low cost of living area like us, a little goes a long way. And so I just really encourage you to be practical and pragmatic when you're thinking about this. And when you're consuming content online, please factor in the husband aspect. Furthermore, to make this work, you need to treat it like a business or a job and ask yourselves these 3 questions. Is your business partner trustworthy and successful. Because say you have a husband and he's making a lot of money, but he's pouring it all back out on the gambling, sports betting, or he has issues with debt, or maybe you have issues with debt. You guys are going to be business partners in this, and that affects a lot of this dynamic. The second question would be, is your business breaking even or is it turning a profit? If you are going underwater quarterly as a family, a single income family, you might need a part-time job. You might even need to pull the plug and get back on your feet before and save a bit before you consider this, because it's essential to look at your home and your family finances as a business and to say, okay, with me not working, maybe you're saving money on daycare costs. Maybe you're saving money on you getting dressed up for work and driving somewhere, or investments in education or whatever. But how are you breaking even? You need to at least break even for this to be functional and to work. I don't think that homemaking should be at all costs, especially when you have children. Before kids, we kind of we strung our life together and it was great. And a little bit of budgeting here or there really got us along. But after kids, things were a lot more serious for me. And I was not comfortable with making my kids feel the financial pressure of life. Okay, so really be pragmatic here and consider other people. You don't know who's in debt online. You don't know how people are making things work. So don't make assumptions, and really, when you're considering this, don't compare yourselves to other people. You have to look at your own finances, your own debt, and your husband's income and everything and factor it all in. I would like to say too that some seasons you might just break even as a family, but if you're ever going underwater, it's essential not just to tighten the budget, but to also consider working. We're commanded as Christians to work hard and steward our money and take care of our kids and our family. It's not wrong to work. It's not wrong to have a job. Let me repeat that. I am a balanced person, and I've never in the history of my channel said that it's wrong for women to work. I've never said it's wrong for mothers to work. That is a personal decision for your family and you, and I would really like to be excluded from the narrative that it's wrong for women to work, because I don't believe that. I think that it is a case-by-case situation. And I would also like to say here that homemaking is not a prescription for life. It is not a medication that is going to automatically make you happy, fix your marriage, or fix your family. It is rather just a lifestyle. It's a way to live. Just like being a career woman is not a prescription for riches, success, and happiness, it's what you do with your current lifestyle. It's how you choose to show up. So someone like me, I thrive as a stay-at-home mom. I hated working full-time. I really could not stand it. But being a stay-at-home mom, I am out with my kids every day. We have multiple play dates a week. If you follow me on Instagram, you know we are busy and loving life, and it's very functional. However, I know women, friends of mine even, who staying at home did not work for them. That does not make them bad people. It does not make it wrong. It is okay if this lifestyle does not work for you. It's not a prescription. It's not something that's going to fix all your problems, which is another thing I've seen online, is just people kind of pretending like there's this gospel message of homemaking, and if we were all to just be homemakers, your problems would go away, and that's not true. Christ is the only gospel we need. Homemaking isn't going to save your soul. It's not going to save your family. It might make things nicer or better or happier, but Christ is the only one who can truly bring you happiness. I need to say that here. Also, let's dive in a bit to the cost of living. So cost of living fluctuates. For my girlies in the rural areas, there's a reason a lot of us get typecasted as like a traditional country wife. It's more affordable. Cost of living is lower. But I've also seen with Gen Z, my little babies who are a bit younger than me, the Pilates mom, the trophy wife concept is really popular online. Just the idea of being this glamorous mother who you lunch and you dine and wine and you take care of your kids, and it's very an easy lifestyle. Very different than kind of the crunchy traditional life stuff that became popular with millennials. And I think this is kind of showing a desire from a lot of women where they do want to be mothers, they do want to have kids, but they don't want to financially struggle. And I think that's reasonable. And I don't think it's wrong for people in the comment sections on these videos, or just in general, or our friends and family, to want to be comfortable. It's not a sin. It's not wrong to want to be comfortable. It's not wrong to want to provide for your kids. And I really just don't think that we need to suffer in order to be homemakers. I also think when we see other homemakers doing well, stay-at-home wives doing well, we don't need to judge them. You know, the whole financial stability too, the advice of just stop spending money on yourself and budget and, you know, make everything from scratch and start a homestead. That's not necessarily going to save you enough money to make it work. Might make life harder. It might even make life more expensive. So take all of that advice with a grain of salt as well. As far as having gaps in your resume and career stability too, that is something I see come up with the economic stability of things. And the reality is, yes, there is a gap on my resume because I stay home. That's true. And I'm not going to sit here and argue it. Just like, you know, if you work full time, you see your kids less than I see my kids. It's not necessarily good or bad. You know, that's your personal choice, but it's reality. And I can also admit the reality that, yes, I would have a much harder time getting hired for a job than girlfriend over there who's been working for the last 7 years. Okay, that's just sometimes with this stuff, with homemaking arguments online, people try to like gloss over everything to such a degree that they're being intellectually dishonest. And I'm not going to be intellectually dishonest with you. Yes, it would be harder for me to get a job. That is a sacrifice that I'm choosing because I love this lifestyle. I love being a stay-at-home mom. God forbid that happens to me and I have to find a job. I will hit the ground running. I will have to start at the bottom, but it's not going to scare me into working for years and years and years and doing something that I don't want to do because I'm afraid. Okay, so that's kind of what this comes down to for me. Don't make decisions out of fear. So if you're working because you're afraid, that's not great. But if you're staying home because you're afraid, that's not great either. Okay? Don't make decisions out of fear. I'd also like to say here, as far as your husband's income, this might be a little bit controversial, but I have not seen this advice online. In fact, I've seen the opposite advice. A lot of advice to young women: don't go to college, don't go to university. If you go to university, a lot of those women have access to men who will have eventually a higher income than other people. I met my husband in university. He has a university degree. A lot of my girlfriends, I have a girlfriend who graduated in accounting. Her husband also graduated in accounting. She worked for 5+ years until she had a set of twins. Now she's a stay-at-home mom with her successful accountant husband. I'm not saying go to college just to find a husband, but I am saying there's an element there where if you are working, if you are pursuing a career, it doesn't mean you can't be a stay-at-home mom someday, and maybe you'll even have a more comfortable lifestyle because you'll meet someone in your field, in that social class, who might make a higher income, okay? And again, that's something that's not really talked about, but there's a lot of just logistics and practicality of the fact that your man can only make so much money. And the amount of money he makes is often dictated by his career, his job, his ambition, his success. And how do we find those men? There's a lot of content online about that. But now that we've gotten to the topic of the husbands in all of this and the men, let's go to the second concern and criticism I've seen online, which is, what if you marry someone who financially abuses you? Or the criticism, it's not wise to be a homemaker because it exposes you to the threat of financial abuse. So power imbalances regarding finances. If he makes all the money, should he be the one who tells us how to spend it? And isn't that a little frightening to your average person who's working and living a life? Your average girl, isn't it a little frightening to think of somebody having full control over and power over your financial decisions as an adult? Haven't we all seen that one sister or friend who got wrapped up and married to a very stingy man, and she has to call him and ask him about every purchase? What's appealing about that? Why would people want to become homemakers if it means they have a man looking over their shoulder and judging their every penny spent and scolding them all the time about money? This is a valid concern and criticism I've seen of homemakers, and I've seen it come up in comment sections, and it's always brushed off, either by somebody saying, well, I love to budget too, or my husband doesn't do that. And I would like to say I am of the vein of homemaker where my husband does not do that. Of course, if we're making massive purchases, we run them by each other. But I, as you can see, I'm sitting in a pink closet with girly stuff everywhere. That was my decision to buy and purchase, and he supported me. I have my nails done. I have a nice face full of skincare and makeup, and he supports my interests, my desires, my purchases. He takes amazing care of me. However, I am not under the impression that every homemaker has those luxuries, because I know that men can be terrible, and there are a lot of ungenerous, stingy men out there, especially the men who marry a woman with the intentionality of being a 50-50 household, and then they get all butthurt when she stops working, so then they just control all the finances and stress her out about money. This exists, and to pretend it doesn't is intellectually dishonest, which is the theme of today's video, addressing intellectual dishonesty online. So how can we protect ourselves? The advice I've seen is to avoid marrying these men. Okay, but what if you didn't? What if you didn't know Mr. So-and-so was going to be stingy until after the vows were made? How can you protect yourself now? And I'm not talking about protecting yourself in case he leaves you. I'm talking about in the marriage. How can you protect yourself from being financially abused? And that would include, excessive monitoring and surveillance of your spending, having to justify all of your spending that's not like food or household items like toilet paper and cleaning stuff, having to really push for your needs, not getting gifts on your birthday, Christmas, anniversary, Valentine's Day, not really getting, anything spent on you, not getting your needs met, not getting your desires met, having to just really fight for your own rights in your household. So why does this happen? Well, I think a lot of times men, when they get married, I've even heard of men who get excited because they have this woman and she's going to be a PA and I'm going to have access to all that money. And then she changes her mind when she has a baby and she wants to stay home. And the family loses access to $75,000 a year, whatever it is. So he becomes really stingy, and he might even view himself as like the lord over the house, like I'm bringing all the money, and discounting the emotional and physical labor of the wife. And not even counting that as contribution to the household. I would say that men like my husband, who truly understand what it is to be a one-income household, they understand that the wife should have equal access and right to all the finances. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, baby. Like, we are all in on this situation together. The wife should also have adequate funds to cover her needs. Anything less is unacceptable. So how can you do this? How can you inspire your husband to become or remain generous with you as a stay-at-home wife and mom? How have I done that? Well, first of all, it's essential to take up space as a homemaker. I've seen this all the time. A woman starts staying home, and in order to kind of justify that choice, because she feels guilty, she's like, oh baby, I don't need to get my hair done anymore. I don't need that beauty item. I don't need to fly out and see my sister anymore. I don't need new clothes. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need a drink from the coffee shop. I don't need a functioning vehicle. And the problem with this is it gets your man used to the fact that now suddenly his wife is not a burden. And you know what? Having a wife, I'm not going to say it's a burden, but I am going to say it's a responsibility, especially a stay-at-home wife that you're financially responsible for and taking care of. It's okay for a husband to feel the pressure of that, to feel the existence of you, because it's his responsibility to take care of you beyond food and water, beyond shelter. It's his responsibility to cover like what you had and who you were when he was dating you. If he loved you in those cute clothes and shoes and makeup, he's got to buy that stuff for you down the road. He is now responsible for you. Okay? I think a lot of men just don't fight back when the women are like, oh, I don't need this, I don't need that. And the women are like, pat me on the back. I'm such a low maintenance woman, a low maintenance wife. Isn't my husband so lucky? But let me tell you, I am a high maintenance wife. I am a high maintenance woman and mother. And my husband is very happy. He loves being my hero. He loves providing for me. He feels great about it. I thank him for it all the time. I appreciate him. I appreciate what he does. And we just have this overflowing, he pours into my cup, I pour into his. And I, therefore, don't feel unprotected. I don't feel unprovided for, and I never feel resentful of him because he just goes above and beyond for me. And that's the issue I see here a lot of the times is woman stays home, woman feels guilty. Woman pretends she doesn't need anything extra. Woman feels strung out. Woman begins resenting her husband. If our goal here with being homemakers and staying at home is to contribute to the overall family culture of closeness and intimacy and functionality, it's essential to make sure that the financial dynamic with you and your husband also contributes to functionality and generosity and practicality. And I would say anything that leads to resentment does not match these goals. You might as well go get a job then. If you think getting a job would be worse for your marriage than being financially resentful of your husband, that's just not true. And as far as outsiders looking in, like I keep saying in these comment sections, why would they want to stay home and be controlled by a husband? Why would they want to be told you can't get your little latte anymore because you're staying home? You can't have the small pleasures in life because another person is controlling your credit card and wallet. Why would they want that? Why would they choose that? You know, that's why I think this, like I said earlier, this trophy wife concept of being married to a very rich man is so appealing, because I think people feel protection in the fact that, oh, well, if he's so rich, he won't notice if I spend money. Oh, he's so rich, I can just spend money and I'll be okay as a stay-at-home mom then. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have to marry rich in order to get your needs met and your desires met. You just have to marry a man with a decent, good, generous heart who views having a wife as a privilege and an honor and not a burden, who's okay and comfortable with the pressures and responsibilities that come with having a wife and taking care of a wife financially. Because you know what? Not everybody gets a wife. Not every man deserves a wife. Not every man deserves a wife. And if your husband was great enough to attract you and earn a wife, he can take care of her. That's okay. He's a grown boy. He's a grown man. He will be fine. You don't need to baby him. You don't need to make his life easier beyond a comfortable stretch. You know, I still budget. I'm not out here buying Birkin bags and Aquazzura heels, but I am comfortable, okay? So there's, as with everything on my channel, balance. So as far too as the criticisms, I agree with the criticisms of, well, I wouldn't want someone controlling all my financial choices and making me feel guilty for buying extra raspberries. I agree with you. I personally would rather work than have a controlling man forbidding me from spending money. So this is why it's essential to not feed into any control dynamics. You could even be married, I've seen this, you could even be married to a good man and you start making yourself feel small and he's just like, oh, okay. And he just, you know, why do you need that? Why do you need that? She doesn't need that. And then maybe they're not a bad person, but you're letting him become a bad person. So be realistic. Factor in makeup and hair if that's part of your lifestyle. Factor in your needs, your desires, your wants. Some girls, you want chickens, you're homesteading girls. You want a little extra money to try out your sourdough or whatever. Some girls like me, I'm a bag collector. I like to pop on a flight and go see my beloved cousin down south or have a family vacation. We all have different ways in which we're going to want to spend a little extra money. Be clear with your husband about your desires, not demanding, but be realistic, open, and honest so that he can have a general picture of what it takes for you to be at home. I would also say, if you want to set aside money for yourself, that is not sinful and wrong. In fact, go for it. You know, I don't really post videos anymore, as you guys know. Also, YouTube views have really dried up in the female space. So I don't make a ton of money off of it. But whatever I do make goes into my little Mrs. Midwest account, and I buy stuff out of that. Gifts, random stuff. Sometimes we put it towards household bills. It's just extra, and it's nice to have that. So if you are worried, consider a part-time job. Consider a little fund or an account or something where your husband can put some money in there for you. I would say that if you're very scared of staying home because of like the financial abuse side, and you're like maybe traumatized because your mom or your aunt or somebody had a bad experience with it, just communicate with your husband and say, I know that you care for me and you're going to take wonderful care of me. It would just make me feel so secure and wonderful if I could have like a little account of my own for some extra money. Work out those details, hopefully even before you get married, but there's nothing wrong with bringing up the idea or concept of having your own like spending money, because you need to start viewing your contributions, your emotional labor, your physical labor as a stay-at-home wife, as a stay-at-home mom. That is a job. That is effort. That is, especially if you've birthed his children, just have to say, I'm back in shape, but I will never be the same as I was before kids. And that was because I furthered the line of my husband and myself, but I sacrificed for him and he sacrifices for me. That's even biblical. We're going to have pain in childbirth. They're going to have pain working out in the fields. It's in Genesis. You can look it up, but don't feel bad. They don't feel bad that we give birth. We don't have to feel bad that they have to work. Furthermore, I would also like to say, my husband regularly, he will shame men. They're not even his friends. They're just like people at work, people he knows. He will shame them if he notices they're like overly stingy or fussy about spending money on their wives. So be mindful of who your husband is friends with. If he was friends with my husband, he would be embarrassed if he wasn't taking care of you. And so I just encourage you to befriend people who maybe have a similar lifestyle, and who understand what it is to be a thriving single income family, because those influences are really important and powerful in these dynamics, because oftentimes too, men will look to their pack, like other men, to see the status quo and the standard. And so if you have parents who are not supportive of you staying home, if you have in-laws who are not supportive of you staying home, and that topic comes up a lot, maybe you need to limit a bit of that time you spend together until you guys get comfortable on your feet and until you're confident in your lifestyle. So be responsible with your finances. You don't need to be anxious. Take up space. You have my permission. I take up space in my house. As you can see, there's floral everywhere. My husband is not sad about it. This brings us to the third and final concern, probably the one I see the most online, and that is to address, what if he leaves you? What if Husbear packed up one day and he was like, you know what? This girl is just not doing it for me. I want to go find somebody else. What would I do? Now, first of all, this is what marriage is for. Do not be a stay-at-home girlfriend. Do not be a stay-at-home girlfriend. Do not live with a man without a marriage contract. Do not have babies with a man without a marriage contract, because that is what will help you in court for alimony, child support, custody, all of that stuff. That is what proves your value and your worth to him. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Marriage is a protection. It's old-fashioned. You hear men all the time online complaining on podcasts into mics similar to this one, where they're just like, "Oh man, marriage is a scam. She can get away. She can, leave you and take all your money." And it's like, you know what? Those protections are in place for women like us, women who stay home, and we don't get a check every week to show our salary. We just do invisible emotional and physical labor for our families. And so having the protections of a marriage contract is essential. So first of all, my husband's married to me, so he couldn't just walk away. We'd have to go to court. I actually commented on a reel, which is what inspired this video, and it was like, and it was like, who's going to join me in not having a plan B? And I was like, nobody should. This is not smart. This is not wise. This is not what homemakers should be doing. That reel actually inspired this video. The girl did clarify what she meant was, who's going to join me in not having a plan B if he, not if he dies, but if he left her. So I would like to say there should be plan B for both of those scenarios. If he dies, let's just quickly cover that. Life insurance, so important. If your husband does not have life insurance and you are a stay-at-home wife, that is foolishness. Go take out a policy today. You need a big policy. If my husband dies, we have a big life insurance policy. We also have stuff through work because his job is high risk. He almost died, like I said, a year ago. And I had to come up close and personal with this concept a year ago. And it really, just made things kind of real for me. You got to have a plan. We did have a plan and he didn't die, but be wise. Life insurance, I will get his pension. I am his wife. I will get his pension. This is another reason why being a wife, not a girlfriend, matters. Make sure you're on the house deed if you own a home. Make sure the vehicles are in your name. Make sure his parents are not going to inherit stuff over you. Make sure your kids are involved in the will and all of that. Make sure too, what's going on with the finances. Make sure you're aware. Having a retirement plan, having 401ks, stocks, bonds, CDs, all of that financial stuff, it's important to educate yourself and know what's going on. My husband is in charge of the finances because your girl, I have like a phobia of the mail a little bit. That's a joke. But bills, all of that, some women deal with it. I don't. My husband is in charge of it, but I'm not obtuse. I know what's going on. He could not be running up gambling debt right now and me not know about it. Okay, so be wise here. It doesn't mean you don't respect him. It doesn't mean you don't trust him. It just means you're a partnership and you guys are working together in this lovely thing called marriage. So if he dies, life insurance, all of that, there's so many protections. And I really think too, people are like, well, what if he dies and you have to get a job? And it's like, then I had to get a job. It's not that complicated. I would not starve on the streets, first of all. I'm a big girl and I will pick our family up with the help of the Lord in my community. So if he leaves me, let's go back to that one. If he leaves me, well, divorce, child support, maybe we'd have to sell the house. Maybe I could buy it out from under him. I'm not quite sure how the house would go. I think that's the number one thing we would lose. Oftentimes in divorces, even when both spouses work, you have to downsize, and someone's in an apartment and the other person is in like a really depressing, smaller condo with no furniture. That's not special to being a homemaker. The advice though I've seen, which is marry a godly man and he won't leave you. And I just have the unfortunate news to tell you that a lot of women get hoodwinked. And you truly, only God knows the heart of a person. So you don't know. You just don't know. And there's trust and then there's blind ignorance. And I really encourage you to not have blind ignorance and to just believe that your man is perfect and he could never abandon you or leave you, because the only person who will never abandon you or leave you is the Lord. I learned that at a young age with family stuff. Sometimes what you think is forever is not forever. And so having a concept in your head of what to do is not wrong or foolish. I'm not saying you need to pack away a secret bank account and be prepared to leave next week, but I am saying that it's okay to have an idea of what you would do. I think it's your responsibility, even as a stay-at-home wife and mother, to have an idea of what you would do. For me, I would maybe go ham online and make money that way. I would maybe go back to designing things like I used to, designing websites, doing freelance marketing. I would have to. That's part of it. But this is where a bit of advice that I haven't seen come online that I'm going to give you with if your husband leaves you, or also if he dies. This is where a good, solid community comes in. If my husband were to cheat on me and leave me, or if he were to cheat on me and I would not stay in that marriage, there would be 30, 40, 50 families at my local church that we're involved in who would be coming around me and the boys to help me. I have a church community that would give me assistance in getting a job. There's so much connections you can tap into at church. They would be helping me with childcare. I would have a network who they'd probably even try to help me pay my mortgage, quite honestly, because in my lovely Christian community, people would support me. This is why church is important. We have a widow actually in our congregation, and she was widowed last fall. She's a friend of ours, and our church has surrounded her. My husband's actually a deacon, and he got her windows winterized this year. We surround her and we help her with her needs as instructed by Scripture. This is important, though. I would like to give a caveat. Not just any church is going to support you. Some churches are sinister and crazy, and they will say, oh, you should stay with your unfaithful, cheating husband. It's your responsibility to make that work, and they won't help you. So kind of do a litmus test with your church, see how they handle these kind of things. If you're very worried, you can even ask the leadership how they would support hypothetically women in this position, because unfortunately I've seen women who have been pressured, not at our church, we would not stay in a church like this, but women who have been pressured by their church body to take back. Men who are horrible, horrible people who have cheated, been unfaithful, criminal men, all sorts of things. So community really matters here. I'm not saying that would be like a forever thing, like my church is helping me pay my mortgage for the next 30 years, but they would help me in that interim time when I was trying to like build a career or whatever. So having a community, also making sure you have friends and family who are around and care about you. Even just like living in an area that's close to friends and family can be really make or break if you're a homemaker. Friends and family too that support you, I would say. You know, a lot of us have family that we cannot depend on, but currently my husband and I live pretty close to family that have just been there through thick and thin with us. They really stepped up when I was a high-risk pregnancy with my second son, Troy. I would also like to say, a lot of this advice just applies to crisis in general. And being a homemaker, just like it's not a prescription, being a career woman does not protect you from your husband cheating on you and leaving you. But also being a perfect wife does not protect you from that, okay? The only thing that will protect you from that is like your husband choosing not to do it. Because sometimes too, God lets hard things happen to people. I don't know why always, but sometimes we have to walk through the fire, okay? So I would just like to say you don't need to be afraid. You can protect yourself. So this kind of brings me to my last point, which is I think in an effort to separate from feminism and all that entails, like being pro-choice, hookup culture, the erasure of womanhood, we've wrongfully run away from some of the truths in scripture that God has taught us. So all of us are one under Christ. Men are not worth more than women. God made us male and female. Husbands are to love their wives and to die to themselves like Christ dies for the church, okay? We're to love one another. We're to respect. There's no command to worship your husband. There's no command to view him as a king or God or the Lord. There's no command to believe he's infallible or perfect. There's no command to view yourself as inferior or to be foolish. And there's no command to turn off your brain. It's okay to have a brain and be a homemaker. We should appreciate the rights we have in our modern world, the rights to have a bank account, the rights to have a credit card, funds, and a job. We don't need to denounce these things to prove a higher level of Christianity. Furthermore, like I said, tragedy happens. It can happen to career people or homemakers. Being a homemaker does not protect you from tragedy or the evils of others. Being a career woman does not protect you from tragedy. You can still get divorced, and divorce is expensive. You can still end up in debt or broke or suffering, and to attribute those outcomes to being a stay-at-home mom, like your life can only end up in the gutter if things go bad as a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home wife, that's just willfully ignorant. Plenty of people have horror stories of people being stay-at-home wives and moms and being abused or struggling. Plenty of people have examples of career women with horrible, hard lives, okay? Like I said, this is not a prescription. This is just a lifestyle. Being willfully ignorant of the criticisms, acting like they don't matter, acting like a blithe don't fear is enough to really answer these questions. I think that's just at best naive, and at worst willfully obtuse and ignorant. And I believe that we can be reasonable, intellectual women who stay home and who are wise, while also acknowledging some of the flaws in the system. Like the flaws, I have a gap in my resume. Things would be a little financially tight and tough if a divorce were to happen. But that's not to say there's not trouble when you choose a career. You know, those people have their own journey and their own path to walk. And the reason too, I think it's important to consider these things is because I want you guys to be confident when you go out into the world, and when you consider these options, I want you to have a plan. Because you know, the beautiful thing about not ignoring these criticisms and problems and issues is that you're able then to just face your fears, have an answer, and move on in peace. I do not spend my days worrying about if my husband were to cheat on me. I don't spend my days arguing with him about, oh, I really want a new pair of shoes. I'm happy and I'm at home and we've made it work. And again, circling back to the more practical advice, how much your husband makes matters. And so when you are like feeding on this content online and you're like, oh, how do they make it work and I don't? Consider if the wife brings in residual income through social media. Consider whether or not her husband is working in IT or something really lucrative and your husband's just not. You know, we all live different lives, and I think that's why it's reckless and silly to just tell everybody to stay home. Stay home right now. It's the moral thing to do, because so much goes into this and so many pieces need to fall into place. And I really do think it's a complex situation and scenario. And I think that's like kind of why this matters so much to me, because when we represent ourselves online as just not caring about what would happen if we needed, like if tragedy were to happen, like I care, of course I care. That's why I have a concept and an idea of what I would do. If we present ourselves as just like so extreme, I really don't think that helps people who maybe genuinely are interested in doing this, but maybe they're turned off because they're just like, whoa, that's so extreme and I could never do that. But you know, the reality is a lot of these people are not actually that extreme. The reality is that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of normal average women. Not even all of us are religious, non-religious, non-political people. You're not like centrist people, left-wing people, right-wing people. It's not exclusive to a specific religion or ideology or belief. And I think representing it as this very specific, crunchy, highly politicized lifestyle is not helpful. And it's not even the point, because what's the point at the end of the day of being a homemaker and staying home? What's the point? It's for functionality, happiness, childcare, making memories, just like living your best life. And it's not about pushing a certain agenda or belief system onto people. It's about your personal family and your personal decisions. So that is all I have to say. If you have more questions about this topic, I do have a video I made a few years ago about how to become a homemaker. A lot of it highlights, well, you need a husband, first of all. I also will make a video eventually. You guys have been asking for a long time how to, talk to your husband about being a homemaker. Right now, this video is a bit how to talk to the world about being a homemaker, how to talk to yourself about these concerns about being a homemaker. I'll make a video on how to talk to your husband, how to tell him, babe, I actually don't want to go back to work after having the baby. That's a big, scary conversation. And now that I have this fun new mic in this cute little room, maybe we dig into these topics. But that's all I have for you guys today. I hope that this is not too polarizing. I hope you can see where I'm coming from. I have genuine love in my heart for a lot of these people who make maybe, trolling the trolls, maybe a bit of misguided advice, misguided content online. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying anyone's a bad person. I would just, I'm giving my perspective here. So I just urge you to walk with grace for the people around you, as I hope we all do. Walk with love in your heart, understanding, and maybe we all just scroll by some of these rage baiting reels and TikToks and content because it's not serving anybody. It's just stressing me out. So anyways, please leave your thoughts below, your advice, your horror stories about being a homemaker, maybe how you overcame things, how you protect yourself. Let's have some intellectually honest, stimulating conversation about this, where we can actually address these criticisms in a healthy and elevated way. But all of that to say, thank you for watching. Don't forget also to leave a like on the video, and if you're new here, subscribe. I don't make videos very often, but when I do, they're long, as you can tell. But in general, hope you have a wonderful week, my sisters. Love you guys.